Hey, so this is going to be a uncut kind of video, but I wanted to give my thoughts on the Canon EOS R3, which is going back tomorrow, so I have to do my perspective video on it now. And this is the first camera that I've had that's had this huge ass body. I mean, it's big and it's heavy, especially with a lens on it. This is not the lens that would go on there, but as you can see, it just looks weird. Like, it doesn't look normal, but in the 80s and 90s, you needed like big ass lead acid batteries. I guess that's what you would be putting in this space down here, but nowadays you don't need that, and instead this has this weird battery. Like, it has this lock you turn and then you take the battery out. Like, that's really weird. I have never seen that before, and this battery looks really bizarre too. Like, this is the weirdest battery I've ever seen in my entire life, and it looks like an internal component. It looks like it's supposed to just live in there, which it probably is, because you're supposed to use the PDE2 USB power adapter that is actually connected to the R5C right now, but works with this camera perfectly. It'll run the camera and charge the battery. But in the case that you don't want to do that, I forgot to bring the stupid battery charger, but basically it's like a sled. You just sled this onto it, and it can charge 2 of these batteries at once. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, as you can tell, it's really meant to be an internal component of the camera, because it just gets bolted in there. It's really weird. It's like it's like the MPEG cam with the hard drive, if you've seen Cathode Ray Dude's video on it. Ignore the bleepy blooping in the background. That's some crappy eBay camera that I bought a couple years ago. It's turning on and off, and I don't know why. I can't stop it, but yeah. So that's a really weird battery, and that it didn't come inside the camera. I'm not entirely sure why, because this looks like it really should have shipped inside the camera, new. But no, it actually shipped with this rubber thing. Just a rubber plate that you stick here, and it just covers the hole. It's really weird. So yeah, I mean, wow. And you take that off, and then you put the battery in when you want to use it. And then you turn the little lock thing, and then you put it in. And yeah, that's bizarre. I mean, I've talked a lot about the battery, but again, it's really weird battery. I've never seen this before. But the battery itself is 30 watt hours, which is pretty good, because the batteries that I've been using, like the battery that's in this R5C right now, it only lasts 30 minutes. And well, that's expected because it's only about 16 watt hours. And the other batteries, like for the R8, for example, is like the biggest camera that Canon has that uses the battery that I'm talking about, is only 7 watt hours. Yeah, so as you might expect, the R8 only lasts half an hour on battery, so that's why. But this lasts an hour because it has a 30 watt hour battery instead of a 16 watt hour battery. So they've basically been doubling the capacity, and this one is double the capacity of the battery below it. Lithium ion battery, of course, like everything else, and it's 10.8 volts. And yeah, so it just slots in here, and then you lock it, bam. You can also run it off of the external power supply, the PDE1, sorry, the PDE2. The E1, I think, can only charge some of the cameras. I don't think it can charge this one though. And it just plugs into USB. And that's another point. I'm not sure why the power adapter is $300. That doesn't really make much sense. We have both power adapters, the E1 and the E2. The E1 was like $200, which is already bad enough for a crappy, noisy power supply. But then, like, they go ahead and charge us with $350 for the PDE2, which, again, is just another USB-C power supply. It seems like it's a bit higher quality, but like, that should not cost $350. Come on, Canon, that's an insult. And yeah, they should not be charging that much for a power supply of any type, let alone a USB one that you could have just plugged this into, like a PD. Like, actually, I have something right here you could have plugged it into. There's USB-C charging specifications. This is one of the things that can do it. This is just a U-Green power brick, costs 65 bucks. And in fact, you can charge a freaking laptop with the power from these ports. It's 65 watts. And actually, that's what the power supply down there is rated as. The PDE2, that's 65 watts. So why you couldn't plug this into the camera and use it just the same, I have no idea. And this thing is infinitely cheaper than the Canon power supply. So I have no idea why they needed to make their own power supply and why it costs a ridiculous amount of moolah. That doesn't make any sense to me. And the compatibility trope is getting old. Like, that's not it. That's not an excuse. Let's see, what else? This is compatible with all of your Canon Canon RF lenses, which this is not. This is a Nikon lens, or Nikkor, whatever. I think it's also, this is also compatible with a lot of Canon, like all the Canon Canon RFS lenses. So they're like the S stands for shit basically, because they're worse, at least in a lot of ways. If you use this lens with this camera or any of the other cameras that don't have an RFS sensor, basically your image is going to be more zoomed in than if you're using a full-size lens. Or just a normal RF lens. This is a normal RF lens that I'm shooting with now. It's the RF 24-105 f4 LIS USM lens. It's a lens that costs about $1,000, but this lens is pretty grand, so whatever. Lenses are expensive, get used to it. Glass, I guess, is really hard to work with. You know, it can shatter and it can move in ways you don't expect, and yeah, the science and everything. It just costs a lot of money to do correctly and awesomely. So yeah, that's why lenses cost so much money. So just expect that. This one, however, was about 200 bucks, and that's because it's not actually a great lens, but it is a macro lens. So I have to use this on our cameras, even though this is an RFS lens and it's like pre-zoomed in, even though this is actually a zoom lens. So, you know, you can zoom with it. You have to, you know, put your hands on it to zoom it. There's no power zoom, which is something that I feel has been taken out of cameras very annoyingly. They should all come with power zoom, especially since, you know, consumer cameras have had power zoom for like 20 years. Come on, Canon. You have to physically put your hands on these lenses to zoom, which for a lot of people isn't a problem. But for me, who does a lot of stuff one-handed while filming, it's basically impossible to do that when you're using a lens like this. So you just have to zoom in and post, which sucks. But this is the only lens that I have that will focus close enough to get any decent amount of footage on something on a table. So I have to use this, no matter what, a lot of the time, which sucks. But whereas the Canon EOS R5C has like artifacts around the edges of your picture when using this, and has different artifacts when you zoom in. With this one, it has no such thing. It'll work perfectly fine. In fact, I'll just put the lens on the camera here, and you'll see that it works pretty freaking well. So you can't actually use it like this, because the lens is not retracted, or it's not in usable mode yet. So how you turn on the camera is you flip this switch, which is really weird, and it's split with a lock position. I don't actually know what that does. I don't read manuals. I just figure stuff out, see what works, and go from there. I only read manuals if I have to. But as you can see, it says set the lens to the shooting position, which you can probably not see. So as soon as I do that, set it to 18 millimeters, which is about equivalent to 24 millimeters for like a normal lens, like a 24 millimeter lens, just RF instead of RFS. So about what this camera's shooting at. 18 millimeters for an RFS lens is about the exact same thing. It's just, you know, a little bit more zoomed in, and that's why the numbers are different. But it works. I mean, there's no card on the camera, so yeah, this does work, as you can see. And you can still flip this LCD out, put it in a bunch of funky directions, which is really useful to do when you're, you know, out in the world or even shooting in your home. It's just really useful to have. Sometimes you want to have it out here, sometimes you're shooting below you, so you have to hold it up. And this also has an eyepiece. And I believe it also came with an eyepiece cup, but I think I left it in the box because I didn't intend to ever use it. But yeah, it has like an extra piece of stuff you stick on here, and it makes your eye, you know, more comfortable, your face more comfortable when pressed up against this for hours at a time, which is cool, I guess. I'm not sure why it's not on here from the factory. Like, that seems a bit weird, especially since every other camera that I've ever had has had that from the factory. Even the R5C has that from the factory. For some reason, this doesn't. That's a bit weird. Maybe it impedes the screen. However, pretty sure that would be a design defect and they would not have designed it like that. But anyway, let me turn this off to stop wasting the battery. This has an insane amount of controls on it. I think this might actually have more than the R5C. And the R5C is packed with programmable buttons. Like, I'm staring at one, mainly number 12, and another one as well, which I can't barely see. No, wait, that's some kind of connector. Anyway, this camera has an insane amount of controls, and basically has the battery grip built in because, well, it has to have a large battery to get a decent amount of battery life. And I'm glad they put a bigger battery into this. This is in the same body as the Canon R1, which is their flagship camera. So whatever this thing has, that thing probably has, but a little bit more. So this has a freaking Ethernet port on it. Like, why? I mean, sure, you could probably push footage over the network, but you might as well just use the card. I was gonna say card best. No, this is Compact Flash Express. It also has an SD card slot, but that's probably mainly what people are gonna use exclusively for taking pictures, which, by the way, here's the switch to switch it between picture mode and video mode. But this thing has an insane amount of manual controls. Or not, manual controls, yes, but also just there's buttons everywhere, there's ports everywhere. There's a freaking port on the front of the freaking camera itself, which is, I think that's called Mini XLR, just by the fact that it has three pins, and that just screams XLR to me. But yeah, so what the hell? It has I'm looking at this camera and I'm still finding things about it that I just did not even see before. This has another, oh my God. This looks like holy crap, you can hold it like this. That actually works. I mean, if you're filming YouTube shorts, I guess that's cool. But it has a shutter button on the bottom edge and the top edge. What else has that? I mean, the Canon R1 probably has that, but still. And what? It has two function buttons and two dials. It has a dial up here next to this button, and it has a dial up here with this button in the normal place. The usability of that for like YouTube shorts, this is a great camera for YouTube shorts. Wait, no it's not, because it doesn't have a stereo microphone. That's another point of this camera. So this has a sled on it, which has this little silicone thing with a bunch of plastic stuff inside of it that slides onto this, or it's like pre-slidden onto this when you get it from the factory, and you have to slide it off. And what this is called, I believe this is called a hot shoe, although it might be called a cold shoe. I don't know. It's some kind of sled that you sled like accessories onto. Now, what do I mean by accessories? Well, I mean stuff like this. This is a flash unit. If you want to take decent pictures, you need the flash. And for some reason, this one doesn't have any built in, even though, you know, the R50, I'm pretty sure even the R100 and the I think the R8 doesn't, but the R10 does. They all have flashes, but for some reason, when you get past the R10, flash disappears from these cameras. Like, not flash storage, I'm talking about the flash, the light emitting thing. It just disappeared from those cameras, and I have no idea why. But yeah, so how this works is, this is the flash module, because you need to add flash onto your camera. So you slide this on, and then it slides on, connects with contacts down in that connector, down in the sled, and then you have to lock it in place with this kind of swinging switch thing. Now you have the ability to, that made a noise, that made me very uncomfortable. Wow. Okay, well, you turn the flash on. I'm not sure what slave does. Hopefully nothing bad. So now the flash is charged. This actually takes batteries, but don't hold that against this. This is a very old flash unit. This is at least 20 years old. So I'm astonished it works with this camera at all. But, you know, you can turn on the camera, which I should have done already, and switch to picture mode. And then you can, just use the flash. That strobed, which is cool that it does that. I figured that out in the last video on Canon that I did. Yeah, so that's cool, I guess. I know a lot of people use that. But this also has an LED light mode, which for some reason is not going on. It's just not working. But in any kind of dark area, this LED light on the front is pretty freaking bright. I have no idea what it's doing, but yeah. You can use this. This has a bunch of buttons and stuff that I don't even know what they do, but I just use this as a flash because you need a flash if you're gonna take good pictures. So it sucks it's not been built into the camera, and it's gonna become unacceptable in a second when you find out that this $5,000 camera, this sub-flagship model, doesn't have a stereo microphone array built into it. I'm not even kidding. And it's in the same flagship body, and it's pretty much the same camera as their flagship R1 camera. It has two microphones, I think. It might only have one microphone. That's even worse than I thought. After the R6 II model, everything above that, or descending down in the numbers, because as the numbers go down, the cameras get more expensive and higher end. technically. Yeah, so after the R6 II becomes the R5. That is a camera that costs multiple thousands of dollars that doesn't have a stereo microphone built into it. And neither does this. This is a $5,000 camera and up. The price goes up above that doesn't have a stereo microphone. Neither does my R5C, and I'm pissed about that. I have to have this wire dangling off of me because the microphone in this one sounds like trash. And yeah, I'm not sure why they did that, because they put, you know, a stereo microphone array in the R6 II. There's no reason why they couldn't have done that here. I mean, there's space, there's like, you're surely paying them enough money for it. You know, if the R100 that costs $400 has that feature, then why don't these have the feature? Same for the Flash. I mean, why aren't we paying up the ass and then not getting the same features as the lower models? It doesn't make any sense. Completely illogical and annoying and impractical, because instead what you would have to do is carry around your Flash module in a bag of some sort, which you have to have on you now, because, well, you need to put it somewhere. You're not going to put it in your pocket. This thing won't really go in a pocket. Yes, you can, but please don't. You have to have this somewhere on your person, and then you have to have a microphone array thing that you also slot in here, which I have. You have to have that on your person or on the camera. So you can't have both a Flash and a decent microphone attached to this camera at the same time. And that goes for pretty much any camera above the R6 II model. And for multiple thousands of dollars, that's a huge ripoff. I'm not sure why they did that, but it's pretty much inexcusable any way you slice it. This camera is very good, but that is a very bad thing to be doing. So yeah, so let's talk about photo quality. This has a 24.1 megapixel sensor. That's pretty good. Although new iPhones, you know, I'm going to compare this to an iPhone again, even though people keep telling me not to do that. New iPhones have 48 megapixel sensors for their main camera, and for an additional camera that's also in the phone, in addition to that other one. And my phone has a 12 megapixel sensor. Now, like higher megapixel versus lower is generally a double-edged sword, because, you know, if the sensor is more dense, if there's more pixels on the sensor, less light will hit each pixel. So the sensor will just naturally be less sensitive than one with less of a pixel density. So you gotta kind of pick a sweet spot. But in a flagship camera, you should have as many megapixels as you can within reason. Like, for example, this R5C shoots phenomenal photos and phenomenal video. And it has, I think, like a 40 megapixel sensor in it, and it can shoot 8K as well. And why am I saying this? Well, I'm saying this because this sensor in this camera is, you know, 24 megapixels, which is 6K. So yeah, and this can't actually shoot 6K. Actually, someone told me they can shoot 6K, so take that with a grain of salt. I haven't been able to figure out how to get this to shoot 6K, but apparently you can. I think it's in RAW or something. Let me try to find it. But yeah, but the video quality of this camera is phenomenal. But the problem with it is it's actually not that great. It is decent. Like, it's definitely better than an iPhone, and to a lot of people, it's the best they've ever seen. But to be honest, I think even the R8 outclasses this in video quality. I'm not even sure how that's possible, but I think the R8 is actually a better camera than this in terms of actual video quality, and maybe even picture quality as well. Although this probably has better processing in it than the R8 does. I think the R8 just has the 2018 grade Digic X, while this has, I think, the Digic X plus another co-processor. That's what my R5C has, but maybe it's only the R5C and the R1 that have that. I'm not sure if the R3 has the additional co-processor thing in it. I can't figure out how to get this thing to record 6K at all. I don't see any RAW option, which I think is how you do that. So I'm not sure how to get this to record in 6K, but that's fine, because I'm not sure why you'd want to do that anyway, since that's not really much better than 4K, and shooting 4K 60 is my goal. That's what I've been after all this time. I just want to do what my phone does, but better, and that's really hard to do. And to illustrate that point, let's talk about the video recording times on this camera. So my phone can shoot indefinitely, pretty much until the storage is full or the battery dies. If I left my phone plugged in, just let it record, it'll record until the storage is full. So 256 gigs. Okay, no, actually it'll record for about 140 gigs and then stop, because that's how much storage I have free on my phone right now. But this thing, no, it won't do that. Instead, this thing will record for about an hour and then overheat. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because I often am shooting videos for much longer than an hour, or I'm shooting subsequent videos in quick succession, and that takes like, 2 or 3 hours in total, if not longer. So I need a camera that can do that. Or sorry, having a camera that can do that is extremely important and integral to what I do. However, this won't do it. It's 1 hour. That's all you get. The battery lasts, I think, a little bit longer. I think it might last about 2 hours. Not the greatest in recording time. And for perspective, again, my R5C here has a fan in it, and that's why it's able to shoot indefinitely, and that's why I'm using it. But this thing doesn't have a fan, and this really should have one. I mean, of any size, it doesn't even matter how big it is. It needs to have vents, it needs to have a fan, because obviously this doesn't work. I know a lot of people aren't gonna shoot 4K 60 for very long, but to be honest, it's incredibly embarrassing to Canon that a freaking iPhone outpaces this. An iPhone from 5 years ago outpaces this damn thing. I think an iPhone from 6 years ago. My girlfriend's phone is 6 years old. It still shoots 4K 60, not horribly either. I mean, okay, it's bad, but I mean, it's not horrible. It's not intelligible. This thing shoots decent video in 4K 60 mode. However, it'll overheat. I mean, that's basically useless to me. So that was very disappointing. But I kind of caught on to this pattern as every single Canon camera we've gotten in the R line has overheated except for the R5C and the R5 II, which is quite ironic because they're both pretty much the same camera, just, some of the stuff has been moved around, and actually no, they're not the same camera at all. Don't completely disregard that. Only their names are about the same and they're about the same size. That's about it. But yeah, this thing needs to have a fan. And to be honest, let me put this into the shoes of someone actually using this. Let me put my shoes into a professional using this that spent their, multiple monthly salary on this thing. You should not be able to say my flagship $6,000 Canon camera is overheating, so I have to stop recording, and have that sentence actually be accurate to what happened. That's embarrassing for a flagship product in 2024. That should not exist. That kind of limitation is awful, and no one should make a camera like that. Doesn't matter what you're gonna do with it. No, that shouldn't exist, especially if you're not going to update your other product line, your camcorder product line, cameras that are actually made for video and consumers and stuff, for like easy shooting of decent video. If you're not going to update that line of products, well, everyone's going to fly to these things, and they're going to find out that they can't record for long enough. A lot of professionals that commented on my previous video told me that, well, they don't record for very long, but to be honest, the fact that a lot of people don't record for very long, that's a cop-out. If that were the reason why Canon didn't put a fan in this, that's a huge cop-out. You should not have to worry about your flagship Canon camera overheating. That's clearly bullshit, and there's no excuse for that. But the video quality is very good. But if you want good video quality and you're not shooting for very long, just get a Canon R8, because the video quality is actually better than this. Like objectively, it just looks better. Better, more detail, better lighting, just everything's better. I didn't really test a lot in terms of the picture quality of this camera, but yeah, as far as I can tell, it's about as good as the Canon R8. I mean, I think it might even have the same sensor in it, so yeah. But let me get back to the buttons. This thing is covered in little buttons and switches. The bottom just has a tripod mount, of course, like why would it not have a tripod? And actually, if that's actually necessary, because if you're not holding the camera and you put it down on a surface, hang on. If you try to put it down on a surface, here it'll stay, but as soon as you put a lens on it, this thing will topple over and it'll just lay on the lens, which is probably not good for the interface here, however beefy it might be. Yeah, so that is quite painful, and I just shot a video with it, with this camera. I had it over there on that box, on those boxes over there, the ones that look like they have slides. That's because they have slides in them. Yeah, I put it on the slide box, and yeah, it failed. Like, it just toppled over. So I had to put something under it that could fill the gap between the front of the lens and the box that the camera was sitting on, so that I could, have the camera be level enough to record with it. So yeah, that's a bit weird, and you have to consider that. One thing else I noticed is a lot of these cameras, they don't exactly have protection for the camera sensor. Like if you like take the cover off, the camera sensor is exposed. But I think ever since the EOS R5, there actually has been a curtain here. Like there's a curtain. Probably shouldn't be touching that, but yeah. That's I believe called the curtain and protection for the camera sensor, which is probably right beneath it. Let's see, what else is there to talk about? Between a lot of the cameras, the EOS R5C and the Canon EOS R3 and the R1 and the R5 II, they just have, like the viewfinder is better and the display here is better. They're just higher resolution. I think the viewfinder is actually much higher resolution than the display, which to me is kind of garbage. I'm never going to use the viewfinder, so making the viewfinder better than the screen, which I'm always using, I don't know why they did that. That's kind of stupid. But I guess a lot of professionals, they don't have an external monitor and they instead just use the viewfinder. And if they need something better, well, they do get an external monitor and they don't use the screen. But it's nice that they upgraded the screen as well as the viewfinder. At least they did that. Let's see, what other stuff am I going to talk about? Oh yeah, on the R5C, which I'm recording with, by the way, again, like it's covered in buttons, and the reason why is because you can reprogram them to do specific things on the camera. And why that's important is, you know, when you're shooting video, you have to have control over your picture, over what you're recording. But how are you gonna do that, you know, while you're recording? Well, you set up buttons, like these ones on the front, for example. Like you can make this one turn off auto white balance, and then you can press the manual function button here, and then, you know, switch to the white balance, and then, you know, use this to adjust it. That's what I do on the R5C here, except the white balance, the auto white balance toggle is actually somewhere else. But yeah, you can do that with, I think, all these buttons, and pretty much all of these buttons are reprogrammable. Actually, I'm not sure if they are. These don't have any numbers on them, so I don't know if you can reprogram any of these, which would be very sad. Although if these weren't reprogrammable, I'm not sure why they're there at all. So yeah, we'll never know what kind of USB standard, USB 2, USB 3, USB 3.2 Gen 2, whatever that this has, because you can't actually pull any files off of this camera through the USB port. I'm not kidding. Canon says there's a way to do it, but it only runs at USB 2.0 speeds, so maybe this USB interface is only USB 2, which would be very disappointing on a flagship camera. You can also, I think, use this as a webcam if you really wanted to. That's like using an Ursa Mini as a webcam, which would be ridiculous, but David did it. This camera also has HDMI. You'll get really excited when you realize that the Canon R1, which pretty much has the same body as this, has a full-size HDMI port on it. But then you'll quickly be disappointed by the fact that this, which is in the same body, has just a micro HDMI port, which of course will break off instantly, no matter what cable you're using or how much force you're trying to not put on it. So that's trashware. This also has some kind of a flash port. I'm not sure what you'd use that for. Well, probably the flash, but you know, this one doesn't use it, so probably a more modern version of this. Instead of taking AA batteries, which are all in here, it instead uses the camera's battery to charge and, you know, load the flash, basically, and to trigger it. Well, it triggers it through the hot shoe, but that's probably how it gets the power to the actual flash unit on the top of the camera. This camera also has a microphone port and a headphone jack. So this is better than modern phones. That's how you can tell, because it has a headphone jack. The microphone jack is also 3.5 millimeter, and so is the headphone jack, which is great. I don't know why there would be anything else, but I've seen that happen. So yeah, you can plug a microphone into it, like I have plugged into this R5C, and, you know, record the audio from that. And you can monitor the audio coming in through the camera through headphones, plugged in straight into the camera as well. And there's like volume control in the software and stuff. What else is there? Oh yeah, the cards that this camera takes. You might not have ever seen this format before. Imagine PCI Express, but, you know, for an SD card. Actually, that does exist, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm in fact talking about Compact Flash Express, which actually might be literally the same thing as SD Express, but for compact flash instead. Although SD Express, I believe, uses the same form factor cards as like just a full-size SD card, except it has extra pins for that, for those extra speeds and stuff. But the compact flash card, the Compact Flash Express cards that we have and that these cameras use are the actually the Type B variants of that standard, which do not look the same as compact flash cards. However, they're roughly the same size. However, their connectors are completely different and in completely different places, like they're on the side instead of on the top. Actually, the way the label is, they're both on the top, but whatever. Normal compact flash is basically like an IDE, like a hard drive interface from the 80s and 90s, but Compact Flash Express, I think it might just be PCI Express, but it doesn't look like PCI Express. It just looks like a proprietary kind of card format, like P2. But the SD card slot, I think it's just a normal SD card slot. I don't think that's SD Express. The SD card slot can, I think, accommodate V90 cards. You know, V30 cards are pretty common, but there's V60 and V90, and that's how many megabytes a second it can sustain. No, that's not right. That might be, no, that might be the amount of megabytes a second it could sustain. I don't know, but basically the higher the number, the faster they are, the better they are. So yeah, I think this can accommodate all of them, although I'm not sure which ones it can actually take advantage of. My guess would be all of them. But the Compact Flash Express, that's actually really freaking fast. In fact, so fast that it'll, you know, max out a lot of computers' interfaces, because the card we got for about $100, it's a 512 gig Compact Flash Express card from Lexar. Realistically, it reads at about a gigabyte per second. Now, why is that important? Well, it's because when shooting video, you know, that's a lot of data to be pushing onto a card. But also, if you're shooting high bitrate video and very high quality video, and even raw video, that's like getting into the gigabits per second. So it's like 200 megabytes per second, which that's a lot, and you probably aren't going to be doing that on an SD card. So yeah, they had to have a new format for that. So I think SD Express actually might be able to do that, but Compact Flash Express is what this camera has, and that's why it has it, because this can actually shoot apparently 6K 60 RAW, which I think is like Canon RAW Light, which is, as the name suggests, just lighter than the normal RAW, not in brightness, but in like bitrate and storage. Like, it just goes lighter. It doesn't go as hard in terms of the bitrate. So it's about like maybe half the size? I don't know. But that takes an gratuitous amount of throughput for some kind of removable storage, so that's what that's for. The card says it can read at 1800 megabytes per second, which is of course bullshit, but I've seen it read at a gigabyte per second, so that's 8 gigabits. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. Oh, also there's warnings all over these cameras, like every single one of them, that you shouldn't take the card out when it's hot because you'll burn your fingers. Not because you'll lose your footage, but because you'll burn your fingers, which has not lined up with anything that I have actually experienced with these cameras. Like I've recorded AK60 on some of these onto that same card, and I've recorded, you know, 4K 60 for hours and hours, for, you know, 6 hours. They haven't got hot enough to burn my fingers. In fact, they were pretty much the same temperature every time I took them out of the camera, and it's not really that hot, and it cools off pretty quickly too. So I'm not sure why that warning is there. Maybe so that you don't drop it onto a hard surface when you take it out, because then you might crack a die if it's too hot. But it's not going to melt your fingers, so I'm not sure why it doesn't say don't drop it, and instead says hot, do not touch. Same thing for the inside of the actual camera here. It says caution, screen and compartment may get hot, do not touch. And that actually doesn't make any sense because it doesn't get that hot, especially since this is plastic and not metal. It's realistically not going to get very hot. In fact, it would probably burn in the actual LCD here, because, you know, it's right there before you would actually burn you. So yeah, not sure why that is, but that's on all these cameras. So the fact that they're spending money to put that sticker there must mean that there's some reason why it's there, or else they wouldn't do that. But again, there's also no good reason why they had to get rid of the stereo microphone or the flash. So they seem to be doing a lot of things that don't make any sense. But what I can say is this camera is very good, but it's not good enough, because it only shoots for an hour, and that's simply useless to me, to us, to what we do here. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next live stream, short, or video, whatever that may be. Thanks for watching, guys. This thing is going back to the pound. See you all next time.
burn somebody else. That's why they had to put it in there. I think there might be...
What?
What did you hear that you didn't
Just repeat it.
Repeat it?
Yeah.
Just because it didn't burn you doesn't mean it doesn't burn somebody else. So there's a possibility that some people are more sensitive to heat and can get burnt with the temperatures that the cameras get into.
Sorry. The microphone was still plugged in. No one could hear.
Well, then that just means that you got a mono mic on there.
Yes.
So, the reason that the warning is on the cameras that you could get burnt in certain areas, because those are the areas that get the hottest, and some people might be more sensitive than you to those high temperatures, and it could burn them. So there may be customer protection laws that say, okay, if you actually are sensitive and our cameras get above a certain temperature, we are required to put warnings on said devices. So I have touched the back of the R8, I believe, and it did indeed get very warm. I don't know if I ever touched it when it got very hot, but that's a possibility. In addition, the warning for the cards that come out will depend on the makeup of the card, how they try to dissipate the heat away from the chips. And it's possible that the metal-clad cards get hotter than the plastic-clad cards. So they're just putting a generic warning for all of the cards that you should probably let them cool down a little bit over a couple of minutes of time before you take them out. So as you said, it may not burn you, but it may be uncomfortable and you may fear getting burnt such that you drop it and it breaks. So it's a good warning that you should take to heart.
Hey, this is going to be a pretty uncut video, and I'm hoping this, and I'm glad they put a bigger battery in. And this is in the same body as the R5, plastic thing, which Canon's just trying to sell expensive cameras for cheaper cameras for less money, or for more money. God. This flagship, after about the more megapixels is generally a double, like more megapixels, you know, less, that's what I've been out. If you leave your, if you're not going, if that were a reason, that's protection for the lens. Or sorry, you're going to be extremely disappointed when you realize that